What up, what up, what up? Welcome back to Pnoid News. So, I want to have a conversation today, right? I want to sit here and talk about things and have the opportunity to be able to put my ideas out to y'all and have a real conversation, right? So, recently we've been talking a lot about cultures and nations and like foundational premises, religions, and all these type of things to try to understand what it is that allows society to be able to function as an in general thing, right? And what we've come up with is that cosmopolitanism, right? The idea of being urban like people who are living in a city, highly educated, aristocratic class, people who can move anywhere and get a job. The idea that you're not tied to where you live, you're not part of that land, you're not a people of a nation, right? You're an individual unit whose utility and whose entire premise of being is based on being productive, right? And your capacity of being able to generate economic revenue is the number one thing that most people judge themselves on and what they judge other people on. Recently, I had a conversation with Darkstar, and he looked at me and he said, well, maybe people, who can't be economically productive should just be killed off. And my brain immediately went to like, well, that's a terrible fucking way of thinking about other human beings, right? So here's my mental. I think that there are a lot of people who, evolutionarily wise, genetically wise, and culturally wise, are not meant to be part of a modern economy, right? Actually, I think about 70% of people aren't, right, at the end of the day. Like, most people aren't cut out to get up every day, go to some place, sit underneath fluorescent lighting and, do work on a computer. Like, they're just not made to do these type of things. Like, human beings are not made to be, little robots in an economy. What they're made to do is, you know, like work land and go hunting and gather and do these type of things. That's what we're made to do as human beings. And I've been working on an ideology, right? Working on a secondary idea of what we should be. And this goes along with the ideas of guys like, Mr. Theodore Kaczynski, right? Who sat here and he said, listen, if you want to sit here and fight the system, you need to make the system fight, right? You have to attack it, right? On a level that it cannot compromise on. So here's what I've come up with thus far, right? I think that everybody should be given a piece of land, 1 acre, right, as a whole. And they should be allowed to farm this land and own this land and own a home, right? And this does a number of things. One is it ties you back to being a human being and being, like attached to like your food and your way of life and like who you are as a human being and the essence of just you, right? Because like when we talk about things like cultures, which is the base of who you are as a human and where you come from, like most people immediately go to food. And the reason they go to food is because when you give somebody food, you're giving them a life, right? You're helping them sustain themselves as an animal, right? And so attaching yourself back to being part of what you are as an animal is highly important. Now, I've been sitting here thinking about this, right? And like how you would set it up, right? And this would be for individuals who fall out of the economy. People like single moms as a whole, right? Individuals as well, right? Like they want to have kids, they want to stand here and do the traditional thing, but they're stuck in this liberal mentality of like they own, like they're the ones who the government's renting the house to. They're the one who the government's giving the money to. And most men, number one, don't want to compete with the government, right? Because the average single mom with 2 kids gets $50,000 a year in assistance. So the men don't want to compete with the government, and the men who make enough money to compete with the government aren't going to. So they just end up being single forever, which ends up dropping them out of the labor force. And which ends up, disconnecting them from their community because of the fact that you're getting money from outside of the community, so you're not attached to it, right? Like you may shop at like your local Walmart or, your Kroger's or, here it'd be Wise Market or Giant, right? Or Carnes or Fox's, whatever it is. right? But you're not attached to like this area. You're not part of this area. You're not like, you know, intermingled with this area. You're like, you could leave and nothing would change, right? That's why, like you say, like, you know, you can change, like, you can take the boy out of the city. You can't take a city out of the boy. It's the same type of thing, right? It's this mentality of like, you know, you're going to bring your bullshit wherever you go. But if you put this person on a piece of land and say, here, this is yours, right? We'll provide you electricity. You have an internet connection, right? So like you have information to be able to do all the stuff you need to do, right? And you go, but you have to feed yourself, right? Here's chickens. Here's, you know what I mean, some goats. In a local area, like a pasture, you're probably going to have like, you know, some larger breed animals, cows, pigs, things of this nature, right? This mentality would force them as a female to go like, I don't want to have to do all this shit. This is too much of me raising these kids. I need a man, right? And then like, you bring a man in, the man would have to say like, oh, this is not going to be your house anymore. It's going to be mine. The government would fucking transfer it over if you became married, right? And these type of things where all of a sudden now the man owns a piece of land, there's no property tax on it, and you could continue to move forward, right? And this would allow these people to have something that sustains them, keeps them busy, and doesn't, you know what I mean, like have them being a detriment to the people around them. Because like they don't just have food provided to them. They don't just have like their fucking shit all like lined up. They have to work for it. They have to sit here and plant and garden and do all these things, right? You have to feed the chickens every day. That means you can't just leave and go hang out at whoever's house. Then you have to be there, right? These cows and things that are going to be like cows and pigs that are in a pasture, like the community is going to have to take care of them, right? But this piece of land's yours as well. So that means like, oh, listen, this is yours. You have to fix these things that break. You have to take care of stuff, right? These type of things, right, would allow you to be able to start forming cultures and families and, you know what I mean, like actual communities and build from the bottom up of where you need to be. And we were trying to figure out how to make this work, right? Because you're like, man, listen, like you need a lot of land to be able to like have like cattle and stuff. Come to find out they have mini cows. I had no idea they had mini cows. Did anybody else know they had mini cows? And if they did, why haven't you mentioned this to the rest of us? You're part of a conspiracy, right? If you knew they had mini cows and you didn't tell the rest of us, like really, you are part of an international fucking conspiracy keeping this information away from everybody. There are many. Look at it. Look at this. Look at this. Exactly. There are mini cows, and you guys didn't tell us, right? Legit. You know, right? Did you know in Maine and Florida, like, they pass bills to allow them to be able to grow food? Did you know this? Right? They have a constitutional right to grow food. And I know what everybody's going to say. They're going to stand here and go like, man, listen, there's not enough, you know what I mean, like land to be able to stand here and, you know what I mean, like have everybody be able to, you know, have a piece of land. Or, you know what I mean, like enough people to be able to have a piece of land. Nonsense, right? 1.9 billion acres, right? And that's a lower 48, right? Only 69.4 million is urban, right? Which means suburban or whatever. Because you know what? We don't know what suburban is, right? I mentioned this in an old video.
2020, right? The United States is a land of suburbs with just one problem. There's not quite clear what a suburb is. It's a question of semantics with real-world implications as government programs, political campaigns, and developers try to spend money in the suburbs where a majority of Americans say they live, despite the category having no formal definition.
But real shit, look, 1 square mile is 640 acres. Again, and these mini cows, how much do you require? Half an acre to an acre of ground each. This is all of a sudden viable. These are cows that can give milk. These are cows that can be for meat. These are cows, you know what I mean, like that, you know, like literally can be trained like dogs to go in a certain place. You know what I mean? Like they're like, hey, look, I don't want to have to go through and pick up all this manure or whatever it is and clean up the property, worry about the smell, whatever. Literally, it could go like to the corner of the property and poop, you know what I mean? And then like you could take it and compost it, use it for fertilizer, for whatever it is you need to do. Again, like all of this is very easy to do. This is basically a regenerative system, right? This is a long-term system. When I talk about systems, right? Especially when it comes to government systems, having the mentality of durability versus dynamism, right? They're basically mutually exclusive ideas, right? You can't have one and the other. Like systems that are very dynamic are not very durable, right? And systems that are durable tend not to be very dynamic. But that's okay because durable systems is something that you have to have. For instance, the water that comes to your house needs to be a durable system. All right, it needs to be something that can like live through like storms and all these type of things and problems and like funding shortages. You have to be able to like have something long term that works and is a viable option, right? These are systems that you have to set up inside of your society as a culture. It's long-term things that are just there. They're infrastructure, right? And the more of your systems that are durable, the better your system is, right? Like there's a reason why India and China have been India and China for like a 10,000, 20,000 years. It's because they're Indian and Chinese, right? They have durable systems. And you go, oh man, listen, like they had caste systems and communism and all these type of things. You know what? They're still there. And they're still going to be there in 1,000 years. They'll still be them, right? They may be like different in the look, right? Of like how they do things, but they'll still be them, right? Whereas us, we keep, trying to be dynamic and adjust and like drive the world forward. And I'll be honest, I don't think progress is a positive thing, right? Because in the end of the day, human beings need to be just like human beings, right? That's the most important thing for a human to be is a human, right? Is to be like, somebody who's going to be a husband, a wife, a father, a brother, who's going to stand here and, be able to like function as a person. And we don't really have this mentality. We have stood here and taken everything like and tried to commoditize it. And I'll give you a couple of good for instances, right? Like when you talk about like what is, like marriage and shit, right? Like marriage used to be you stood here and married a female, like it was a compromise between the man and the woman. It was basically the woman says, I will only sleep with you, right? Man says, I will provide you provision, right? And I will guarantee that my children are yours and you will be okay and safe. That was the trade-off, right? That's literally like like, and then we got into the level like like how is it or what is it that like females value, right? They go, all right, well when you get married now you're supposed to have like a fucking rock that's 3 months salary or whatever it is, right? Well, why is this? Because that's how much a female feels like her vagina is worth. We commoditized women's vaginas, right? When we talk about like our society and our criminal justice system and like how we treat each other for like social ills, we commoditize that, and now everybody thinks everybody's a rapist and a pedophile, and like they're gonna fucking like bag you in an alley and sell your organs because like we commoditized our news and our like our social values with television and the media, right? This is what we do. We've commoditized everything rather than have them be durable, right? Where like you could have a community that is like people you trust and people who like you could sit here and discipline each other's kids, and like protect each other and make sure nobody gets hurt. That's not a thing anymore. Like people don't even have any idea who their neighbors. I was having a conversation with a dude last night, or not last night, a couple nights ago, and like we asked him and said, listen, if your neighbor was getting it, like your neighbor's house was getting like raided by 50 Ethiopians or whatever it is, right? Like, yo, wouldn't you stand and fight, to make sure that like the Ethiopians and like come and run through you next? He said, no, I would never fight for my neighbor. Basic. But these are the younger kids today. This is how they feel. This is what they think, right? So these mentalities, right, need to go away. Like this is cosmopolitan ideology. This is very individualistic, self-centered ideology, but these people are liberal, right? These are your liberals. These are your Democrats. These are your left wing, but they're extremely individualistic. The right wing, is extremely individual. Like we have two sides of liberalism. It's just split in half, but they're both liberal, right? Like the right wing is. Listen, I don't even know anymore, to be honest with you, bro. They don't really stand for much. It's all just populism. It's like fuck the left. That's what the right stands for. It's fuck the left. But and the left wing, is literally the economic wing, the military wing, the social wing. Like all these things are all on the left now. They have taken over the entirety of liberalism, right? And the right wing is just economic liberalism, where it's, we need to have cheap shit. I was having a conversation with like a real conservative female here recently, right? And she's like, it's inflation, it's crazy, and blah, 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 blah. And I was standing here and I was looking at it and I go, well, uh, and she was like, man, listen, because like we're all relying on China. We need to stop being relying on China. I was like, are you okay with like paying, an extra $20 for everything you buy? And she's like, no. I said, but that's what it would cost to like have Americans make these goods. And she was just dumbfounded because like this thought pattern had never entered her head. And I understand she's a woman, but like these are the mentalities that we have. And these are things that we don't really have conversations about. And we probably should, at the end of the day. We should really talk about this stuff and get down and dirty and, you know, have an understanding of what everything is. Now, with this idea of like acreage and farming and getting back to the land, like this is probably the best way, right, to fix and solve the problems from the inner cities, the problems from, like the poorer whites, the problems from like the Puerto Ricans and whoever it is, right? Like all these social ills, right? The single motherhood epidemic, all these things. This solves all of it, right? But the problem is it's not economically dynamic. We're not asking them to start businesses and sell extra goods. There's not going to be any property tax. We're not asking them to generate revenues and profits. This isn't communism or socialism either, because they own this. It's theirs, right? It's not everybody. It's theirs. But they have to feed themselves. We're not asking them to feed anybody else, just themselves. Something new, a new idea. Y'all tell me what you think about my idea. Hop in the comment section. Let me know what you think. Like, yo, I'm going to have a conversation with General tonight, and we're going to get down and dirty about this stuff. All right? Yo, look, Tom P's of Pnoid News. You know the deal. Like, share, and subscribe. I'm up.